On a cold Christmas night, a millionaire CEO sat in his car, drowning in silence, with nothing left but grief and regret. But when he stepped into the shadows, disguised as a homeless man, he never imagined that a little girl's small act of kindness would change everything. Her name was Hannah. With nothing more than a stale sandwich and a battered backpack, she carried more courage and warmth than all the riches in the world. And in that moment, something inside him began to awaken. This is not just a story about survival. It is about second chances, about finding family in the most unexpected places, and about the way love can heal even the deepest wounds. Stay with us because this journey will touch your heart. Subscribe now to Hidden Echo Stories, where hope is never lost, only waiting to be found. On Christmas Eve, while the city shimmered with dazzling lights and cheerful laughter, Noah Whitaker sat in his sleek luxury car as though it were both his fortress and his prison. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened, his breath fogging the glass as drizzle slid down the windshield. To everyone else, the night was alive with joy, with families hurrying home, with couples stealing moments under glowing decorations. But for him, it was only emptiness. His heart, once filled with ambition and love, had become a hollow room where echoes of grief bounced endlessly. The man who had once been praised as a visionary CEO now felt like nothing more than a shadow among shadows. He tried to remember the sound of his daughter's laugh, the warmth of his wife's voice, the feeling of belonging in a home that wasn't just square footage and polished glass. But the memories came like shards, sharp, fragmented, cutting more than comforting. The world outside celebrated miracles, yet he felt cursed, locked in a silence he could no longer break. His phone buzzed relentlessly on the console, emails, missed calls, reminders of obligations he no longer cared to meet. His empire demanded him, but his soul refused. Somewhere in the quiet chaos of his mind, his therapist's words returned like a haunting. You need to step outside of your world, Noah. You need to remember what it is to be human. At the time, it had sounded like a riddle with no answer. But that night, as loneliness pressed against him heavier than the December rain, the idea of escaping his own identity became irresistible. What if, for just one night, he disappeared? What if he stripped away the armor of wealth and power, and let himself feel what it meant to have nothing? With a shaky breath, he reached into the back seat where a thrift store parka lay folded, almost mocking in its simplicity. Shedding his expensive suit jacket, he slid into the shapeless coat. One by one, he emptied his pockets, wallet, phone, car keys, even his gold wedding band, all placed into the glove compartment like relics of another life. When he shut the door behind him, all he carried was a single wrinkled dollar bill and the kind of grief that no money could soften. The city at street level was a different place. From inside his car, everything had always seemed distant, like a picture on glass. But now, as his shoes struck the damp pavement, the world was raw. He walked past Christmas markets where families crowded around stalls, where the smell of roasted nuts and mulled cider filled the air. He felt invisible among them, a stranger in ragged clothes, his face half hidden under the hood of his coat. No one recognized the man who once appeared on magazine covers, shaking hands with politicians and speaking of innovation. Tonight, he was just another forgotten figure, wandering without destination. As the streets grew quieter and the lights less frequent, he found himself under a concrete overpass. The sound of traffic hummed above like a heartbeat for a city that did not care whether he lived or disappeared. He lowered himself onto a cold slab of stone, his breath curling white in the winter air, when his eyes caught sight of movement in the corner. There she was, a small girl, no older than 10, wrapped in an oversized pink coat that had seen better decades. Her skinny legs dangled over the sidewalk edge, and beside her sat a battered pink backpack bulging with whatever little she owned. Under the flicker of a weak street lamp, she carefully arranged lollipops in a row, her tiny hands trembling slightly from the cold but moving with precision, as though the entire world depended on this ritual. Noah froze. Something about her steadiness, her determination, pierced through the fog that had consumed him for years. He watched as she pulled out a sandwich wrapped in brown paper. With a plastic knife, she cut it neatly in half, the movement practiced, deliberate. Then, without hesitation, she slid one half toward him. "You look hungry," she said, her voice soft but firm, her eyes steady. The words struck him like lightning. He, a man who could afford gourmet meals in the finest restaurants, who owned properties worth millions, sat stunned before a child offering him half of her meager dinner. For a long moment he could not speak. Then, with shaking fingers, he accepted. The bread was dry, the cheese stiff, yet it was the most nourishing thing he had tasted in months. Not because of the flavor, but because of what it meant, that even here, in the forgotten corners of the city, kindness still lived. They ate in silence. She glanced at him occasionally, not with fear but with a quiet curiosity, as though she were measuring whether he belonged in her fragile world. When he finally asked why she was out so late, she shrugged and spoke of selling lollipops to help her sick mother. No bitterness, no drama, only simple facts stated with the bravery of someone far older than her years. Her name was Hannah, and in her cracked hands, in her stubborn pride, in the way she tilted her chin as though daring the night to break her, Noah felt something stir inside him, something fragile but alive. It was as if this little girl had reached into the ruins of his soul and struck a match, faint but bright enough to be seen. For the first time in years, he did not feel like a ghost. For the first time, he felt the possibility of belonging again, not to the boardrooms, not to the empire he had built, but to the simple human connection that Hannah had so effortlessly offered. The city roared on, indifferent, but under that overpass a seed of hope was planted. And though Noah did not yet know it, his life was about to change forever. The night after their first meeting, Noah found himself unable to leave Hannah's side. Something about her presence tugged at him, anchoring him in a way he had not felt in years. She was small, fragile even, but there was a fire in her eyes that made her seem larger than life. While he had spent years building towers of glass and steel, she had been surviving on sidewalks. Armed only with determination and a handful of lollipops, he could not help but wonder if she was teaching him, without even knowing it, what it meant to be truly strong. The next morning, Noah awoke on the cold concrete beneath the overpass, his body stiff and unprepared for such a life. He rubbed his eyes and saw Hannah already awake, arranging her lollipops on a makeshift tray with a seriousness that reminded him of board meetings. Only she was not presenting quarterly reports, she was fighting for gas money and medicine. She gave him a nod, as if to say, "It is time to work." He followed her to a grocery store entrance where she set up her small operation. At first, Noah stood back, awkward in his thrift store parka, watching her greet strangers with a polite smile that barely reached her lips but somehow held a spark of honesty. "Would you like a lollipop?" she asked a woman in a red scarf. The woman stopped, dug into her purse and handed over $1. Hannah's face lit up, not with greed but with relief. Each sale mattered. Each coin meant warmth or food for her mother waiting in a broken van nearby. Feeling a surge of responsibility, Noah tried to help. He picked up a handful of candy and approached a passerby. His words came out too formal, too stiff, as though he were pitching a product rather than offering sweetness. The woman frowned and walked away, leaving him flushed with embarrassment. Hannah giggled quietly, shaking her head. "You are too serious," she whispered. "People do not want to feel sorry for you. You have to smile with your eyes." She demonstrated, her tired but bright gaze softening, her mouth curving in a way that made strangers pause and respond. Noah tried to mimic her, and the result was clumsy, but her laughter broke through his shame. It was the sound of a child who had not forgotten how to hope, even when the world gave her so little reason to. That sound filled something hollow in his chest, a sound he had once heard from his own daughter. Throughout the morning, Hannah continued selling, patient and resilient. Noah marveled at her discipline. She counted every coin, guarded her backpack, and treated each customer with the dignity of a professional. To her, this was not begging. This was survival with pride. Watching her, Noah began to understand the depth of her strength. Later, she handed him a paper cup of cocoa, still warm from a kind stranger who had bought it for her. She pushed it into his hands. "You tried," she said, as if she were the adult comforting a child. "It is not easy." He took a sip, and for the first time in a long time the warmth did not feel wasted. As the day went on, Hannah told him about her mother, Lisa, who was ill and waiting in their van. There was no father in the picture, only stories of a man who once existed but had vanished from their lives. Hannah spoke with acceptance rather than bitterness, her tone matter-of-fact, as though she had long learned that life did not always answer with fairness. Noah felt his chest tighten. He had walked into this night to escape his own pain, but what he found was a child carrying far heavier burdens than his own. That evening, as the sun dropped and the cold pressed harder against the city, Noah followed Hannah to the van she called home. It was parked behind a warehouse, patched with duct tape and covered in the grime of too many storms. Lisa lay inside, pale, weak, her cough rattling the silence. The air was thick with damp blankets and stale medicine. Hannah immediately busied herself, fluffing a pillow, checking water, her small hands tender with care that seemed too grown for her years. Noah stood frozen, the reality cutting deeper than any headline about poverty he had ever skimmed in a business report. Lisa tried to smile at him, her voice hoarse. "You brought someone?" she asked Hannah, her suspicion mixed with gratitude. Noah introduced himself simply, leaving out the truth of who he really was. He felt ashamed of the luxury he had abandoned only for a night, now faced with the relentless survival this mother and child lived every day. When Lisa's cough worsened, Noah instinctively supported her frail shoulders, feeling the fever through her skin. He had never before been so close to such raw vulnerability. It terrified him, yet also awakened something protective. He gave her water, offered what little food he could find, and even draped his own coat over them. For once, he was not the CEO making decisions from a distance. He was simply a man trying to keep a sick woman warm. As the night deepened, Hannah curled up beside her mother, clutching a worn teddy bear, her small frame trembling. Noah sat awake, his mind racing. He had wanted to disappear, to live like a ghost for a night, but now he was bound to this family by a thread he could not cut. The thought of leaving them alone in that van made him feel sick. For the first time in years, he did not want to run from responsibility. But danger had a way of finding those already fragile. A man named Donnie lurked nearby, muttering about territory and protection fees. Hannah stood her ground with a bravery that both horrified and amazed Noah. She faced him down, chin lifted, until a security guard's presence drove him away. Noah realized then that the streets were not just cold. They were cruel, filled with threats that no child should ever have to confront. Later, as rain dripped through the broken seams of the van, Hannah pressed her tiny hand into Noah's, steady and trusting. That simple touch undid him more than any loss in his corporate life ever had. He held her hand, wordless, a silent vow taking root in his chest. He did not yet know how, but he would not let her go. And as the city carried on, indifferent, Noah discovered that this little girl, with nothing but lollipops and courage, had begun teaching him the most important lesson of his life. That strength is not measured in wealth or titles, but in kindness offered when you have nothing left to give. The longer Noah stayed with Hannah and her mother, the more the thin line between his old world and this fragile new one blurred. What had begun as an escape, a reckless attempt to disappear from the cage of success, had become something far heavier. Lisa's illness grew worse each day. Her cough echoed inside the cramped van, her skin damp with fever, her voice fatting. Noah could not ignore it. He had stood at hospital beds before, powerless, watching someone he loved slip away. He swore he would not let that scene repeat itself here. When Lisa collapsed one gray morning, Noah's instincts took over. Panic surged through him, but his hands moved with clarity. He begged a passerby for a phone, clutching the card a social worker had given him the night before. His voice, steady and commanding, rattled off medical details as though he were leading a boardroom negotiation. Minutes later, Flashing lights painted the street as paramedics lifted Lisa onto a stretcher. Hannah cried out, trying to follow, but Noah knelt and held her back gently. "You called for help in time," he told her, though it had been his call. Still, he wanted her to believe she was not powerless. At the hospital, Noah signed paperwork as a temporary guardian. His hands trembled when he wrote the word friend under relationship to child. He had built companies, signed million-dollar deals, yet this single word felt heavier than any contract. While doctors worked on Lisa, Hannah clung to him, her small hand gripping his sleeve as though he were her only anchor. For the first time in years, he let someone depend on him without fear of failing. But secrets never stay buried. News stations began reporting that the famous tech CEO Noah Whitaker had gone missing. His photo appeared on television screens, on flyers plastered across the city. He tried to shield Hannah from it, but truth has a way of finding its way to the very people you most want to protect. One afternoon, a piece of paper blew across the street, and Hannah caught it. Her eyes widened as she stared at the headline and then at the man beside her. "Is this you?" she whispered. His throat closed. He could have lied, but he had lied long enough to himself. "Yes, Hannah, my name is Noah Whitaker. I did not mean to trick you. I just wanted to understand what life was like without money and noise. I wanted to feel real again." His voice cracked, raw and uneven. The betrayal in her eyes cut deeper than any loss he had endured. She pulled away, clutching her backpack like a shield. "You are just like everyone else," she cried, before running into the city's maze of alleys. Noah's chest burned as he chased after her, but she was faster, fueled by hurt and fear. He searched until his lungs ached, until his legs gave out, until despair threatened to drown him. Then a sound pierced the air, Hannah's scream. Sharp, terrified, alive. He sprinted toward it, his heart pounding like it might tear free from his chest. In the dim streetlight, he saw a man dragging her toward a dark car. Marcus Lane, the predator who had been stalking vulnerable children under the guise of authority. Hannah kicked and fought, but her small fists were no match for his grip. Noah shouted, his voice raw and desperate, "Let her go." He threw himself forward, placing his body between Marcus and the child. At that moment, the world narrowed to the rain-slick pavement, the glare of approaching sirens and the sound of Hannah's sobs. Marcus snarled, but the sight of witnesses and the flashing beam of a social worker's flashlight made him hesitate. Police cars screeched to a stop, officers swarming the scene. Marcus tried to flee, but within seconds he was pinned, his false authority stripped away by cold handcuffs. Hannah collapsed into Noah's arms, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. He held her tightly, whispering promises he prayed he could keep. April, the social worker who had been searching with him, laid a hand on his shoulder. "You kept your word," she said softly. In that instant, Noah knew trust was not something you earned once. It was a choice you made again and again. Tonight, he had chosen not to run. Tonight, Hannah had chosen to believe in him again. At the hospital, Lisa's color began to return as treatment took effect. Hannah ran into her arms, both mother and daughter trembling with relief. Noah stood back, watching the reunion, his heart aching with something he had almost forgotten: hope. April's words rang in his ears. He is not her father yet, but he is family. And for the first time, Noah allowed himself to believe it might be true. The days blurred into a rhythm of hospital visits, paperwork, and shelter nights. Slowly, Lisa regained strength. Hannah's laughter began to fill the spaces that had once echoed with only grief. Noah found himself doing things he had long abandoned, telling bedtime stories, buying coloring books, even burning pancakes in a kitchen that no longer felt like a stranger's. But the most important change was not in the rooms around him. It was in himself. The emptiness that had haunted him was being replaced, piece by fragile piece, with connection. He had thought success was about money, about recognition. Now he understood that true success was sitting beside a sick mother, holding a little girl's hand, and refusing to leave when things grew hard. 1 year later, the penthouse that had once been silent and cold was transformed. Hannah's drawings lined the walls. Laughter filled the air. The sterile order of Noah's old life had been replaced with the chaos of family, shoes scattered in the hallway, the smell of chocolate chip cookies lingering long after midnight, a rescued cat prowling across countertops. On Hannah's 10th birthday, she handed him a picture she had drawn, 3 figures holding hands beneath a rainbow. Above it, in uneven letters, she had written, "This is home." As he held her close, Noah realized something he had spent years denying. Family was not about bloodlines or names on legal documents. Family was about showing up, about staying when you had every reason to run, about choosing each other again and again. And in that moment, he knew he was no longer a man pretending to survive. He was alive. He was home. There are stories that entertain, and there are stories that leave a mark on the heart. Noah Whitaker's journey was not about wealth or power, nor about losing himself in grief. It was about rediscovering what it means to be human through the unlikeliest of teachers, a little girl with nothing but courage and a battered backpack. Hannah's kindness on that cold Christmas night was small by the world's standards, yet it cracked open the armor around a man who had nearly surrendered to emptiness. It was proof that love does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers through the smallest hands. Noah entered her life as a stranger hiding from his past, but he stayed because she gave him a reason to believe in tomorrow. Through her quiet bravery, he learned that family is not defined by blood, but by choice, by the act of showing up when it matters most, by refusing to let go when the world tells you to walk away. He discovered that true strength is not built on fortunes or skyscrapers, but on holding someone's hand when they are trembling, and on keeping promises even when it hurts. Lisa's survival, Hannah's laughter, and Noah's transformation remind us all that second chances are possible. Even in the darkest corners of our lives, hope can return if we dare to open our hearts. And when it does, it not only changes us, it ripples outward, touching everyone around us. Noah did not just save Hannah and Lisa. In many ways, they saved him first. As the years unfold, their story becomes more than just a tale of survival. It is a testament to the enduring power of kindness, the resilience of love, and the beauty of chosen family. It asks us to look at our own lives and wonder, where have we been running and who have we left behind? What might happen if we stopped hiding and started reaching out? Because at its core, this story is not about a CEO or a child. It is about all of us. It is about the universal longing to belong, to be seen, and to be loved. And it reminds us that no matter how lost we feel, there is always a way back, sometimes guided by the smallest hand. If this journey touched your heart, let it be a reminder that you are never too far gone to start again. That even the coldest nights can lead to mornings filled with laughter, and that love, in its purest form, has the power to heal wounds we thought would never close. Here at Hidden Echo Stories, we believe in sharing tales like this, tales that remind us of the strength in compassion, the miracle of second chances, and the echoes of hope that linger in the human spirit. If you believe in the power of love and resilience, if you want to carry these echoes with you, we invite you to subscribe and join us, because the next story might just be the one your heart has been waiting for.